Hello. I want to
Well,
welcome
hello there.
Yeah, it's great to see you. I want to welcome everyone to Office Hours. We're going to have a great 1 hour here with I have met and been very fortunate to meet so many fabulous, inspiring educators, but you're at the top of the list. I mean, this is a person who just
Aw.
blows you away with the passion and dedication she brings to her students and with her vision. And so this is going to be fun. I am really honored to be here with you. So maybe introduce yourself briefly, but I think it'd be interesting. A lot of the people, and I'm seeing some of the names here in different places that people are tapping in from. I'm going to bet a bunch have never been to your island. I always describe Molokai, it's an island just off the coast of heaven. And so, but Katina, if you could talk a little bit about your background, how you got into education, and also explain to people just a bit about your fabulous location, Molokai.
Sure, will do. And I see, hi, Hawaii people. I didn't think we'd have too many today. I see people from the East and West Coast and the Pacific. Awesome. I know it's the middle of the day for us, so everyone's working. So anyway, I am from Molokai, Hawaii. We're one of the most remote islands in Hawaii. I grew up here, went to high school at Molokai High School, where I'm now the principal. I actually got into education because education didn't work for me. So growing up, I was actually, top of my class in traditional learning. I did, student council, 4.0, honors, all those things. I did great by traditional standards, but I still ended up being a dropout. I heard Tony Wagner did the same. So I actually didn't graduate from high school. And part of the reason I left was I wasn't getting the social emotional support that, we call it that nowadays. But back then, at 1 year when I was in 9th grade, a bunch of things actually happened that year. There was a sex assault. My mom had cancer. We had a foster child that was a teenager with a bunch of issues. And it was just a really rough year for me. And on top of that, every day that I would go to school, somebody wanted to get into a fight with me about something, physical fight. And so it was just such a traumatic year that I was just like, you know what, even though I was in student council and all of that, I was like, I don't feel safe here. And I left and homeschooled and got my GED.
And this was in Molokai. You went
and so when I did after this, sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was going to say, so
Can
you
hear
were
me?
elementary,
Okay.
middle, and high school in Molokai, right?
Yes, all on Molokai. Yes, I grew up here and went to this high school. It used to be a K through 12, 7th through 12 high school, middle and high when I went here. Yeah. So once when I left, I said, I'm coming back and making this school a safe place for kids to go so they can learn, because that was all I wanted to do, was learn and go off to college and, be top of my class and all of that. And that didn't happen for me. So that's what I did. I actually went on to get my bachelor's in psychology and then my master's in education in school counseling, and came back as a school counselor for 8 years at this school. And after that, I worked really hard. We put into place some great programs, but it was kind of in the NCLB days where everything was high stakes testing. And the focus was really just on reading and math, and was really difficult to put in programs that, worked on school climate and all of those things that are also important for a child's upbringing. And so I realized that in order to make the kind of difference that I wanted to make, I needed to be in charge and be in administration. So I went on to get my doctorate, and I went to get my certification for a Department of Education principal certificate, which led me to have to work on another island. And then 3 years ago, I was appointed principal of Molokai High, dream come true. So I'm back where I started, and living the dream. Like, these kids are my passion and my purpose. And I over the years, my vision has changed from not only wanting to just have a safe environment, but I want them to be valued and learn. And we want to celebrate talents beyond just reading and math. Our kids are amazing hunters, fishermen, artists, and all of those things should be celebrated. And all of those things are lead into great life skills. So that's what I'm about. And that's why we're here. And all of the work that you are doing fit perfectly into place with that. So that's why I'm so hard for the movement.
Yeah, well, I know that, and I've often observed that when you look at the upper levels of, for instance, the U.S. Department of Education or education foundations or state departments of education, often they're populated by people that love school. So they sort of think everybody ought to love school the way it is. And the reality is many kids don't. So I'm always excited when somebody's in a position like you're in, who sort of knows what it means like to go to school that you're not comfortable with it. You just feel like it's got to be different. I think that probably puts some of that change agent in you.
For sure, for sure. And I actually loved school. School was my thing growing up until, things got really difficult and I didn't feel safe. And so it's the same. I imagine that, students who aren't great at reading or math feel uncomfortable at a traditional school because, every day they're not feeling comfortable and they're having to do things that they're not great at and kind of being beat down by the system. And so that's something that we really need to change. And they have multiple intelligences, multiple things that you can be great at. And so we need to celebrate more of that at our schools.
Yeah. And could you share with our listeners, a little bit about your island? Because we do have a number from Hawaii, but we've got people, I know somebody from Perth, Australia, which is
totally, awesome.
Yeah, I was there last year. That's a great place. But I mean, if you've never been to Hawaii, you probably might assume Molokai is somewhat like Waikiki or, Oahu. I mean, maybe fill people in. It's a very special place, but I think people love to hear what it's like and particularly how that affects the kids and the way they think about school.
Sure. So Molokai, again, is very remote. And we actually, a population, they keep saying it's reporting at about 8,000, but it could be a little more, a little less, depending on the time of year. We probably think it's up to probably 10,000. But I'm the only public high school on the island. We have one middle school. We have 5 elementary schools and 2 really small private schools. So our island is really small. Probably the total number of kids that are in school is probably 2,000. And our graduating class is less than 100. So our entire school is probably smaller than most graduating classes in bigger schools. So we have no franchises. We do have a Napa and an Ace Hardware, but we don't have a McDonald's. We don't have a Walmart. We definitely don't have a Costco. So we don't have a lot of those modern conveniences. Most of our businesses are mom and pop stores and restaurants and family owned, people who live here and are investing in our community. So we have a lot of activism here. Part of the reason that we're not overly developed like Waikiki is because people want to keep it this way. It's one of the more traditional Hawaiian islands. And so there's actually rules in place that you can't build higher than a 3-story building. And anytime someone wants to develop something really big, like a hotel resort, then the community really comes together to shut that down really quick. No matter the amount of money they offer, there's no price, like it's priceless to keep this island the way that it is. And so people will fight for that. So everyone is pretty friendly here as long as you don't try to disrupt that lifestyle. And so it's amazing because it's beautiful, it's remote. If you want to come to a place where you can hunt, fish, or sit on a 2-mile beach all by yourself, this is the place. But at the same time, if you're, want to go into a certain career, there's limited job options. And so it makes it difficult for people to be what the world would define as successful and still be on this island. To be gainfully employed and still live on this island is very difficult. And so part of what we're trying to do is develop our kids to be innovators, and they figure out that problem, solve that problem. How can we keep Molokai, but also educate our kids, have them leave and go get an amazing career, but come back and bring that wealth and knowledge back to our island. And so finding that balance is our mission, and it's a difficult one.
But I will share my first experience with Molokai. My wife and I flew there, and we had lined up renting a car when we landed. So you take a tiny little plane and you land on the island. And,
yes.
And you're sort of thinking you're going to go to the local Hertz office or something, but instead it was like somebody was renting their car. They said it's like It's in this row by, a purple and green van, and the keys are under the visor, and you just go and get it. And you're like, I don't know, it's like a 15-year-old Jeep or something. And then,
Yeah.
there are no stoplights. It's really, really just a wonderful place. But also on that first visit, and I just was kind of randomly exploring there, I found you have an amazing robotics initiative. I mean, it was so interesting. You've got
Yes.
kids that were getting, they were really into all of the nature around them, the hunters and the fishers, and that's great. But you also had, I mean, this is a world-class robotics initiative on your island, in your school.
Yes, we have some amazing, amazing people. And what is interesting about our robotics team is kind of a little bit on a hiatus this year. They're still working remotely a little bit, but is that it wasn't just the high-end kids that are in robotics. We have a gamut of kids. We had some who, are special education students, and then we have our AP students, and both ends of the spectrum participate and did really well in competitions. And they're not the only ones. I think if you look at our school on, like Honolulu Magazine ranks schools, they haven't done it yet this year, but we tend to be on the bottom if you use traditional measures. But we have amazing athletes. We have a 2-time national wrestling champion. We have our robotics, that's world class. We have kids that, have gone to Harvard and Princeton and all of those things as well. But again, we also have, if the world, like right now in a pandemic and everything was shut down, you would want to be here with our kids, because our kids know how to hunt and fish and survive without all of those modern conveniences. We would survive. I'm not sure city kids would do as well. So,
but it's sort of, that's such a great point, because it begs the question of how, in what ways are kids gifted, and the kids could survive in the middle of all sorts of things going south in the world. That's a remarkable set of talents and skills and capabilities. And yet that kid might not score too well in your test. I have to confess, I hate those test score magazine, and Hawaii has them, every state has them, where you'll visit a school like yours that's doing the most remarkable things and helping kids in very different ways. And it doesn't translate into test scores. And it's just like, it's such a distraction. And sometimes, and I think you've done a great job of insulating your school from feeling that way, but it can be demoralizing for teachers to see the magazine says we're a bottom quintile school, but we know we're doing great work.
Yeah, and I think the part of that is, sorry. No, I was just gonna say part of that is why, like the profile of a high school graduate is so important, because it helps us put together those real world skills that are important to everyone, but it also allows us to add in some of those skills that are specific to where we are in our own island community, and embed those in there and make sure that's what we want our kids to achieve when they leave our school.
Yeah. So we'll make a bit of a transition. I want to give a little backdrop here, because I just bragged about you being so inspiring, but one of the most important days in my life was in May of 2016, when I had spent an entire school year going to every state, and Hawaii was the last state that I went to. And so I met this guy in Hawaii, and I don't know if he's on today or he's got a full-time job. He's kind of this remarkable guy, Josh Rapoon. I just want to brag a little bit about Josh Rapoon, who's just become one of my very best friends in life. But, if we could clone him and make sure every community had their Josh, everything in our country would be so much better. And so we met in May of 2016. I've been to Hawaii. I miss you guys so much. I've been there 12 times counting that trip, visiting schools, and have seen schools all over in every island. I've been kind of here, there, and everywhere, and been blown away by the progress you're making. But Josh, we started working with the Canoe Complex maybe 2.5 years ago, because they're just some amazing educators. But you have, colleagues that are also doing great work.
Yes.
And we're an early adopter of our first rev of the innovation playlist. And then Josh has gone on. I mean, Josh has done so many screenings of Most Likely to Succeed, brought so much energy and vision across the islands, gotten groups to work together in amazing ways, does this amazing, I listened to his podcast with you. Season 1, episode 3 is with you, of his What School Could Be in Hawaii podcast, which is really, it's a great podcast reaching globally now. But then he did this film called The Innovation Playlist and talked about, you know, the great progress happening across the islands. And there's a clip there that involves you. So we're going to embarrass Katina a bit here, but I find it a very powerful and moving clip. And so if we could watch that for a second as a group, that would be great.
Okay.
And really looking at how can we best prepare the kids, not just academically, but emotionally and personally for the future, to go out and have that sense of self and sense of place. So even if they leave Molokai, they take that piece with them to share. Hopefully they come back and they make Molokai better.
What in your mind would represent a good set of essential competencies for your kids to develop as they come through the experience at your school?
We took the opportunity to figure out what our kids need to learn and talk about some of the skills and dispositions, whatever characteristics they need to be successful outside of high school.
If you're able to say, we're doing this intentionally because we as a community all agree our kids need to be good at creative problem solving, or it's really important for our kids to be very good at collaboration. That's going to be an important capability for them as an adult. Then when you start to do more project-based learning in science, or more team-based critiquing of essays in an English class, or a whole set of things, where people say, well, that's different, you know, like, why are you doing that? You say, we as a community just agreed that we want our kids to get good at whatever. And so we're intentionally introducing more aspects into the learning environment that promote the very goal we all agree as a community. And some people will say, oh, yeah, okay, that makes sense.
If you understand the learner profile of your students, you're going to be a successful teacher and you're going to allow them to be successful students.
I think understanding the learner profile is so important, especially for so many new teachers who have never taught. I mean, myself, I taught for 6 years in Rhode Island. I have totally had to change my entire approach. And if I'm unwilling to understand the learner profile, I'm going to keep going up against this roadblock.
I think that's why it's really important for us as a community, as a school, to discuss what the profile is, because if we don't have a good concept of that as a team, then how are we supposed to make these shifts? Like innovation, I think, is such a great thing for our school, for our kids, because of their learning profile. And if their learning profile is different, then we would have to shift what that experience should look like to help meet their needs.
And so I think the power of any place, but particularly a place like Molokai, to sort of step up and say, we know best. We know what our kids are going to need to be good at to really thrive, to have that kind of future that will work for them in their home. I think that's really an essential step.
All of the teachers on our island got together and we asked those questions. Basically, what are the essential skills you would like to have, see our students have when they graduate? And they're helping us to build our profile of a high school graduate. And so what we're going to do with that is take all of those and combine them into what our profile of a high school graduate. And then that'll be coupled with our teachers are working on essential standards. So they'll be doing the academic side.
Education is shifting to focus more on being life successful. Using these attributes that we have in our learner profile, these kids are striving for it now. And they're going to continue to build momentum as they strive for the rest of their lives. These attributes are a more accurate measure of future success. And that's the type of energy and passion we want.
It's awesome.
Awesome.
So, yeah, it's great. So for those who haven't seen this, and I'd encourage everybody to watch this amazing film, it's on the whatschoolcouldbe.org website. I'm sure it's on some of Josh's MLTS in Hawaii and What School Could Be in Hawaii websites, but definitely watch it. I mean, it's beautifully put together. Josh worked with Digital Sea Writer, John Allen, Kendi Suisa's great program. And it features just some knock your socks off progress in Hawaii. I feel like you know, most people think the big reason to go to Hawaii is because it's a great place to, you know, for tourism. But when we finally get through this pandemic, I'd say go to Hawaii to see the amazing progress happening in education there, because it's really been remarkable, and lots of great leadership. And the person I'm sharing the screen with is an amazing leader, not just on her island, not just across the islands, but I think nationally and globally. But I'd love you to sort of walk through, because so many people, I mean, you know, I meet a lot of people, and there are a lot of people who say, you know, I'd love for our school to change, but I don't know where to start. How do I do it? We're sort of stuck in the mud. So sort of tell me a little bit about how what you've done that you felt was really effective, because you've really made enormous strides and really transformed learning experiences there.
Okay, well, I actually can't take all the credit for that. I think we have an amazing staff who's willing to get behind me. I did have the privilege of working with them previously, and so they knew where my heart was, and they knew that my heart was for our kids. And so I had the advantage of not having to take years to build trust with them, for them to believe that I was trying to do what was best for kids. I also had an amazing mentor in my previous administrator, Lydia Trinidad, who I actually worked for a charter school for 6 years, and she was a real trailblazer. She was one of the first charter schools in Hawaii, and so she really forced me to think outside of the box. Like, school doesn't have to look exactly like this. You can go in this direction, and everything will be okay. And then I also came in at a time where we had a new superintendent, and as well as our complex area superintendent, who really gave us the freedom to do what we needed to do for our schools and what we felt was good for our schools at the local level. So I just want to put that into perspective, that I did have a lot of support from all of those stakeholders going forward. But the other thing was that, like I said earlier, you know, our school was listed in traditional measures on the bottom. So we really had nothing to lose by trying. And so we really embraced the fall forward. Let's do it. Let's try it. You know, we've done, over the last 20 years, we've done all of the consultants. We've, you know, been almost restructured and all of those things. And all of those didn't work for our kids. So let's do what we think is best for our kids and our community. And so folding in, building that profile of our Molokai graduate is what we call it, because it's not just Molokai High, it's our whole island, and every school puts into our kids and our community. And we feel like that title embraces the community component of it, that it's not just a high school thing or a school thing, it's a Molokai graduate. And we took, we had our entire got on board, and we specifically chose people from different stakeholder groups. We had clergy, we called legislators, we called businesses, the colleges, private schools. Of the schools were represented from pre-K to college. We had Native Hawaiian organizations. So we invited all of these stakeholders, and then of course families, students, our parents, and educators, and got together and said, what do you want to see from our kids when they leave Molokai, and how do you feel like they'll be successful on or off our island? And so we asked those sort of questions through a dinner and through a day that was prepared by, thank you, Josh, and all of the team at Pupuho came and helped us, and we had an amazing day of just discussions and writing and activities to kind of elicit these different thoughts, and we came up with what knowledge, skills, and dispositions we wanted for our Molokai graduate. And a lot of them did align with the Department of Education's GLOs, or General Learner Outcomes. A lot of them aligned with our HA, which is our kind of Native Hawaiian values or characteristics we want our kids to have. But then there was also something specific to Molokai, which was like Aloha Aina, which is taking care of the land. And more than that, like, the land is part of you, and you live on the land, and the land will feed you, and sort of that kind of concept. You take care of the land, it takes care of you. And it really goes deeper than just, you know, farming. It's about ours, that we're stewards, and we need to take care of our natural resources. And so that was one that definitely is distinctive to our island. But we went through all of those processes, and it actually took about 2 years. So the first year we just did a dinner where you came, we played Most Likely to Succeed to kind of get people on board. Like, this is why we're having this discussion, because the world is changing and our kids need to get ready. And so kind of got that sense of urgency going. And then we got, initial information about the characteristics. And then we met a year later and had that conversation again. Like, this is the draft of our profile of a Molokai graduate. We got some feedback that way, but that was also our call to action. So we invited all the stakeholder groups again in a community night. And then we shared it with them. And the call to action was, now, how are you going to help our kids get there? And so we got contact information from partners so our kids could go and do internships with them. Some of them have offered funding. Some of them have offered experiences for our kids, field trips, just a ton of things that our community, just in our small community, we haven't even really reached out beyond that. And then from there, we, over the next year, we finalized our profile of high school graduate, and it just actually came out in July. And so we are now being able to live that vision, and everything that we do is beginning to circle around that pointing at what we would like our kids to be when they leave Molokai and hopefully come back.
And come back. Do you remember? Do you know what you identified in your portrait of a graduate or profile of a graduate?
Yes. Some of them, the ones that overlapped, would be collaboration, community contributors, communication, all forms of communication, reading, writing, speaking. Another one that was a little bit different from others was financial literacy. That seemed to be really important for families. Perseverance, and then some of them were like life skills. We couched it under life skills, but really they wanted kids to know how to apply for a loan, write checks if those are still going to exist, pay taxes, but some of those things that you don't necessarily learn in school, but you're required to do as an adult, and nobody teaches you. You just kind of fall into it. So those were some of them. One of the big ones, other than the Aloha Aina, was a sense of identity and place. And so for us, on Molokai, where Hawaiian culture is so important, 80% of our kids are Native Hawaiian. There was also subheadings of language, culture, values, and kuleana, which means like your responsibility, your sense of responsibility to your culture, your land, your family, all of that.
Yeah. No, you've touched on so many great points. I'll peel back on a few of them. I mean, financial literacy, it's incredible to me that that's not central in our high schools, because among things, there's great math in financial literacy. I mean, you can actually use simultaneous equations. You can actually apply probability. You can actually use curve fitting and exponential functions. So taught right, financial literacy is a great window into all sorts of math areas that otherwise seem esoteric to kids. But I mean, it's just heartbreaking to see so many kids leave, not just high school, so many kids leave college with no financial wherewithal whatsoever. And I'm convinced it's a bit of a, that colleges don't want kids to take financial literacy courses because they might not borrow as much money to go to college.
Right.
A bit of a jaded view. But I wanted, for those who don't know the innovation playlist, just my short version description of it is these are on-ramps to deeper learning principles. And one of the things we start with is, I love the phrase, if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. And what we've done by working in the field and capturing best practices, but I want to come back to that day and evening I spent with you, that a bunch of, there's so many things I could talk about in Hawaii that are just great, but I put right on the list is the generous spirit of so many educators in Hawaii. I mean, that day when we were there, I think 10 or 11 educators flew from different places to sort of participate, help with things. But we had this incredible day, and then you showed most likely to succeed. And then we had this discussion afterwards on profile of a graduate. And, on the playlist, we really point people to Ed Leader 21, which has a whole set of resources on helping schools and examples of what different schools have come up with. But that power of pulling in the community and giving them voice, and you had students, you had parents, you had a bunch of your teachers there, but you had a lot of the community members. And as you said, and I find this is a universal truth, is people in the community want to help their schools. Businesses, nonprofits want to help their schools. And so you were able to go to them with a well thought out request for support, and they reciprocated. But I remember, this was the highlight for me. There was a group there that were some of your elders on Molokai. And I'm like a little nervous about talking to them because, they've just seen this film, and I just spent time in your robotics program. So I didn't know whether they would I didn't know what they think about that. So, and my view is it's not my role to come along and tell a school community what should be important to them. You know, it's up to them, right? So I really was anxious to learn from them. It was so interesting because ultimately they want things that just are admirable. You know, they want kids to be able to be engaged in their school experience. They want kids to come through your K through 12 system and be able to stay in Molokai and have that be a great life experience for them. So they're not against interesting jobs. They just want to keep Molokai. And they were so thoughtful about your priorities. And so they were big fans of yours, among other things. But it was just, and that sort of helped us formulate our next iteration of the playlist because we saw how powerfully it worked there. But I think you took it further. If you don't mind talking, there was a group a little over a year ago of complex area superintendents that came on a field trip and visited you. And the feedback I heard was that they went and they were just blown away by kids working on projects and kids debating each other and asking great questions. And so some of the things that I think are really hallmarks of great student-driven education, great, you know, integration of real-world challenges into education, you've been really effective in doing. But maybe talk a little bit about that experience, how they reacted, and were you nervous when they were coming, and, you know, kind of what was that day like?
Yeah, I was a little nervous, but we really just showcased our students. We spent most of the day with our students speaking for us and using that student voice to talk about what our schools look like and how it's changed and how we're changing and what direction we want to go. And so they were blown away by our kids. And again, I really try hard not to just have our high-end AP, the most articulate in traditional standard students represent us. I had the whole gamut of students come to talk to them. And so we had our hunters and fishers, and all of them came and spoke with them. And they actually talked about, they gave them a tour of the school. And then they talked about what we have and what we don't have and how we make do with so little. And I think that was probably their takeaway, was how we do so much with so little. You know, because we're a small school, we definitely don't have too much in the way of funding. And so we have to be really innovative in just having a school, period, and all of the programs that we're able to offer. One of the things that the kids talked about was shadowing. So I had several of the students that I was able to shadow there. And so they spoke with the superintendents about that whole experience and how it not only changed the school some, but it changed them. I showed several students. There were a couple of AP students, and watch the documentary film on what schools could be, the innovation playlist film. But I also shadowed a special education student. I shadowed kind of a middle of the road student, and I actually shadowed quite a few. But anyway, one of them, the middle of the road student, was very shy, very quiet. And by the time that she spoke with the superintendents, which was probably about close to a year later, she was like the most outspoken thing. They asked her to speak at another event because she just kind of came out of her shell. And I spent the day with her in a lot of classes. We went to clubs. I had to rec CAF that day, so serving other students in the cafeteria. And she was also a wrestler. So I fully participated in wrestling practice, which was hard, like really, really hard. I know this is kind of gross, but I'm just, so you know that I'm being candid about it. There's a bucket by the door, so you can throw up in the middle of practice if you need to. That's how hard practice is. And but she was a great athlete, and spending the day with her not only allowed me to build a better relationship with her, but all of the kids that we were with. So, you know, through wrestling practice, they had a little more respect for me surviving that practice. In her math class, you know, I got to talk to kids about, you know, what they're learning in math. I was in her trigonometry class. And so that experience, and then one of my takeaways for me as an administrator was that students didn't say hi to each other. So she was a friendly student, a little on the shy side, but, you know, not a troublemaker by any means. And no one said hi to each other other than a couple of her very good friends. And so that was one of my takeaways, was like, if the adults don't say hello to students and acknowledge them, other students may not. And so that was one of the things that we worked on as a school, is like acknowledging each other and making sure that students are doing that So that was just a little aside. But those were some of the things that they shared with the complex area superintendents, and why they were so impressed with our kids, because they have so much to offer. And I learned probably more from them than they learned from me in those shadowing experiences. But I know that's described as well in the innovation playlist. And I would say, I know you didn't ask me, but I would say that's one of the best bang for your buck activities. If you can do one, that's the one that I would pick, because you learn so much about your school, so much about yourself, about your students, about your staff, and it just gives you a completely different lens on learning. So,
absolutely. Yes. Yeah, we're starting to get some great questions. So,
Okay.
So Keisha McDonald asked, this is a really great question, and you're in a perfect position to respond, but how can school leaders create and communicate the culture of safety teachers need to try to do new things and innovate?
I would say for me, which is what, you know, the leadership over me has done, was just give me freedom and not punish you for trying. For us, like I said, you know, we have nothing to lose by trying. And so I encourage our teachers, just try it. They and it's been really great, because they come to me with ideas. I'll just give you a kind of off the wall example. One of our social studies teachers noticed that our 9th graders, this is in the previous year, were just having trouble with communication, expressing their feelings, just very emotional, but not able to communicate that. And they asked, is it okay if I focus a little bit more on SEL rather than, you know, this US history content? And I was like, by all means, because in the end, we want them to be good human beings, you know, that can get along in the world. And knowing the year that, you know, Hawaii annexed from the United States, or, you know, they bombed Pearl Harbor, is that more important than them being able to express their feelings and potentially avoid, you know, getting into some type of conflict that'll, you know, they'll end up in jail. So those are the types of things that they do ask. But I'm like, yeah, go for it, try. So I think it's allowing them, encouraging them, but also just showing them I was willing to try things. I think the shadowing the student, just so you know, the part of the culture here was that me trying weird things. So even the kids began to ask, not so much this year because we have only a few students on campus, but last year I'd be dressed a different way, or I'd be seated in a different place, or I'd be doing something else, and they'd be like, what are you doing today? Are you shadowing a student? Or what are you doing today? You move your office again? Or, you know, like the kids knew and the teachers knew that I was trying something else. And so just modeling for them, it's okay to try and fall forward. Didn't work, try again. It's fine. We'll just do the best. Yeah.
No, absolutely. You know, when I wrote the book, What School Could Be, and one of the common denominators of classroom teachers who are doing, you know, innovative things in the classroom, or principals doing innovative things, is that somebody had their back. And so it felt like it was safe to innovate. And that message, which is why we work really hard on things like producing films like Most Likely to Succeed. I think Josh's film, The Innovation Playlist, is a big contribution. When you can start to show your community things that say, this is why we're doing it. That's why I love what you did with the profile of a graduate, is we're doing this because we want our kids to be kind and compassionate, or we want them to be good collaborators. But I think you've got to put in place the conditions to support the great work our teachers can do, because I find almost every teacher wants to do this. This is why they entered the profession, and we just kind of get in their way too often with these accountability measures that honestly just deserve to be bulldozed under. And there's an opportunity this year because they are largely being pushed to the side. So we have Julie Maurer ask a great question. Vibrant Hawaii would like to build a movement for using the Innovation Playlist in Hawaii, which I would love to see you do. How do we best facilitate this? You know, you've got a lot of people there to draw on, and you know, the playlist, everything on it is free, including, you know, all films, all resources. So it's wide open. We are actively soliciting feedback. We're going to have an upgrade, another upgrade in January, where we'll facilitate a community aspect to this, so that groups of teachers in a school, groups of schools in a district or complex can communicate across each other. So we're making some good progress with that. But I would say, you know, Hawaii has really emerged, I think, as a global leader. And I think you've gotten some great support at the top. You know, I think the governor and the first lady are behind you. I think Christina Kishimoto has been I mean, my gosh, that was talk about a great superintendent of public instruction to bring in. But I think the power in Hawaii has been what's going on in the field. And and so I think that on this site, but I think, my best bet, if you want to get this movement really, turbocharged, email Josh at Rapoon.
That's what I was going to say.
There we go.
Or go at Most Likely to Succeed, MLTS Hawaii.
Yeah.
He will help you. He's been amazing. Yes.
Sorry, Josh.
And then we have a question from Becky. I know it's not the one on the screen, but she's asking, how would you suggest teachers could do that if their principal isn't open to those types of strategies? So I just wanted to address that one really quick. I think one of the easiest things that you can do, well, two things actually. One is read the book if you haven't read the book. There's lots of different innovations that different schools have tried. Watch and then go and check out the innovation playlist as well. But one of the things that our teachers do that is just in your classroom would be the Socratic seminar. So just starting to change the way that you teach, that would be one. And I'm not sure what grade level you're at. Another one I would suggest is checking out like the Curiosity Corner or Genius Hour, just giving kids some time to explore what interests them and find out their own passions in the classroom. Those are some things that you can begin to do just in the classroom level. But another way would be to have people watch the film. If you can get a group of your teachers to watch the film, Most Likely to Succeed, and just it gets people fired up and a sense of urgency, like we need to change education. If you can get them to do that, that would be one. I know I said 2 suggestions. I got one more. Sir Ken Robinson's, that was one that we showed to some people who are on the fence. How schools kill creativity. That's also on the innovation playlist. It's like a 20-minute TED Talk that you can show that will just completely shift thinking. It's funny, it's entertaining, but it's so true. And I think it'll begin to have your principal shift their thinking a little bit. See the sense of urgency. Sorry, go ahead, Ted.
Yeah, no, those are great. And I'd say, the good thing about educators is they all want good things for kids in schools. And we've intentionally focused this playlist on small steps that lead to big change. So it's not everybody has to do things totally different. And it's all put in a really positive light. So it's not, oh, all this other stuff is terrible, so we need to do something. But, we just try to make it easily accessible. And I do think you can get clusters of enthusiasm. And I do think I agree with your recommendations. I mean, there's nobody that's ever watched Sir Ken's TED Talk. And probably some of the people know he and I had formed a nonprofit together, in 2018. So his loss was immense for everybody, but I felt it personally. But you watch his talk, I mean, nobody regrets watching that talk. I mean, it's upbeat, it's fun. He's a great stand-up comedian as well as somebody that's got great education insights. And so we're really focused on trying to provide resources to people. I find every school has its change agents. And so what can we do to support the change agents in a school? Because, it's too important for our kids to let one person's grumpiness stand in the way of progress. And so I feel like if we can start to generate enthusiasm broadly and put it in a positive context and not say everybody has to, but who wants to. That's a big help. We've got a great question here from Ann Keith. Where should a school start to make a change from a traditional setup to one that focuses on deeper learning?
And she kind of commented that I answered that question with the other question I answered as well. But I would say the same thing. Start with the film or start with some really quick TED Talks or some of the short videos to build some inspiration and that sense of urgency if people are reluctant to change. And then the other side would be to just get some people who are willing to take some small steps and slowly get that team to be bigger and bigger by using some of the strategies. I think once people start to see that it works and that you're excited about it and that kids begin to get excited about learning, they're our best selling point. Like I did, with our complex area superintendents. I don't want to speak for it. Have our kids speak to how things are changing. And they'll be the best selling point you can get. A principal can't argue with the students.
I'd say as well as many negatives as there are this period of time, and that list, we could spend the next 5 hours talking about the challenges of this period of time. But I do think it's opening up people's eyes to different ways of learning. And when I circle back to the people we've done films on or I've written about, when we've equipped students with the skills to lead their learning, when they find it meaningful when they're trying to do things that are connected to the real world, they continue to learn whether they're in school or out of school. And so I feel like we can build on that. And what we really try to do is not pile extra demands on teachers that are already greatly overworked, but to try to offer leverageable things so we can spark more student learning with more fulfilling teacher time. So John Carver asked, how is the student learning profiles connect to professional career dispositions?
Oh, well, I think at least the one that we came up with was built in partnership with the businesses. And so we were asking them, what do you want to see from our kids? And so it's specific to us, but what they would like to see. And a lot of them are the skills, the skills like Ted was saying that you learn in school are the ones that will translate into being a good adult worker and all of that. So communication, perseverance, and problem solving are some of the ones that are on ours. Being responsible, so under that for us is meeting deadlines and having time management and organization. Those are all things that you'll need from a great employee someday. So I think they do really translate into great job skills as well. Yeah, collaboration is a huge one. And then for me, one of the most important is the community contributor part, is like, how do you give back? You're doing great at all these things. Now, how are you going to help, your peers or your community or your grandmother, bring it back to the place where you came from? I think that's really important. Don't forget where you came from.
The whole career piece is so interesting. We've got some great resources on the playlist with career fairs and internships. And I do feel for a lot of kids, seeing something they might enjoy doing later in life can pull them through school, particularly for kids who at times feel like, they're just not into it or they don't see the relevance. A couple points I'd like to make on the career front, though, which is I am definitely not a STEM Kool-Aid drinker. And so many people will say, well, the only way you're going to get a job going forward is if you have a STEM background. And so all kids need to do STEM, and on and on and on. And I point people to the study Google did, where they looked at the 10 best predictors for how somebody would do at Google. And out of 10, number 10 on the list was a STEM background. And what was high on the list? Asking good questions, being able to work well with other people, bringing empathy to problem solving designs, being able to think outside of the box. And so I feel like we often can gloss over the things that really can help kids later in life, that make kids want to be in school, oftentimes because we think, oh my gosh, every kid's got to take AP computer science or something that to me just doesn't make any sense. And so I think those are really important, but I think that there's a need to sort of step back and think what really does empower somebody for a career. The last point I make on career is that it's very difficult with machine intelligence racing ahead to know what careers will be here in 10, 20 years. And that to me is where encouraging kids to be comfortable wading into a situation that's got a lot of ambiguity, just getting good at saying, I can figure it out. And so often in school, we go to great lengths to purge all the ambiguity out. We need to make it very clear. This is what you've got to do, blah, 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 blah. And I think that they're really great learning opportunities by challenging kids with somewhat ambiguous, challenge, like figure out something, find a way to make your community better and go for it. Create a great project to do it. And oftentimes it's those superstar academic kids that get really nervous about that because they want to know, like, what do I have to do to get an A? Tell me what I got to do to get an A. So
frustrated.
Yeah. So we've got, I have a feeling I know who this is coming from.
Yes.
I am not going to talk about Jess Ford, but I think you can talk about Jess Ford's implementation of Socratic Seminar.
Yeah, so Jessie is one of our special education teachers, and she really embraced, she's also has an background in ELA, English Language Arts. And so she really embraced the Socratic Seminar, and she's been using it with her special education students, and they have grown by leaps and bounds. So, it was a rough road. She began with just asking simple questions, but things that they might like to talk about, like, should you wear deodorant or not? Something like that. Or do you prefer, I think it was a funny question that we used before, like, do you prefer to have deodorant or mouthwash or something like that? Just like a fun discussion about 2 points. And then the kids could kind of argue and counter argue on certain points like that, but just fun things to get them talking. And for us, about hunting, should you have to have a license to go hunting, or simple things like that, and slowly moved it into academic topics. And our kids who, in a regular classroom would normally not answer any questions at all, by the end, we're able to run a Socratic seminar and have the discussion almost independently of the teacher. And it was just amazing to see over a few months how much progress they could make. And again, they're building the skill of communication that they would have never had she not tried that one particular strategy with our kids. So she is definitely a success story, and she is featured in the film. So I would suggest you check it out if you haven't, the Innovation Playlist film. She's one of those that was interviewed and featured there. You have a question?
Yeah, well, we've got a couple. There's Clark Wright, and then a different question here about what do you do with teachers, parents, or students who resist change? How do you approach and deal with that? And maybe each one's different. Maybe you start with teachers, and then we'll switch to parents and students.
Okay, so I think a little bit about teachers. I'll just straightforward show them the film. I think I haven't found anyone so far that has been able to argue with what Most Likely to Succeed talks about. We all know that the world is changing, and if you talk about the huge leaps and bounds we've changed in the last 20 years even, you just can't argue with the film. And so that was one of the biggest and easiest ways to deal with them for me. And then again, Sir Ken Robinson's TED Talk was amazing as well. And I haven't had any resistance after showing those films and having those discussions. So I would say show it, and then also have a follow-up discussion. If not you, if you're the one pushing it, have a discussion amongst a group of people, so that it's not just you pushing that idea, but I think you'll all come on over to our side once you've seen the film and had those discussions. What would you say, Ted?
Well, the one thing I always encourage, I'll say, if you've got a teacher dead set against any change, my general advice is just ask them to keep an open mind and not kind of rain on everybody else's parade. And so I feel like there's so much more progress that's possible in a school if we encourage and let the sprinters sprint, let the runners run, the walkers walk. And then the ones that are just, some teachers teach quite traditionally and it's very effective. And so to me, once we sort of enter into that mode of everybody has to do something different, it's sort of like suddenly you set into play a dynamic where people, for better or worse, they often want to, in a way, undermine the process. And so, but I find you start letting the sprinter sprint, and suddenly a lot of other people want to teach differently. And when they see that it's being celebrated, that this people get excited about. The question about parents, though, is so interesting, because I tell you, I've not yet met a parent who doesn't say, well, all I really want is for my child to be happy. And then you watch it play out and you realize that's not the dynamic that's going on here with between the parent and child. And I feel there are two issues with parents. One is it worked for me. Why should it be any different now? And why we made the film Most Likely to Succeed is try to open people's eyes. We got a short film on the future of work. I don't think it's really an intellectual thing. I think it's just a visceral thing about parents desperately wanting their kid to succeed in some ways, and often acting in a way that really does jeopardize the long-term prospects of the kid, their mental well-being. I tell this story in my book. It's worth going into. Is that an employer I ran into had an interview set up with a college senior, and he gets a call a week before the interview, and it's the senior's mother calling and saying, "My son can't make the interview next week. Could I come in his place and cover for him, because I can explain to you what he's doing?" And you realize, why are you doing that? Why are you doing that? So I don't know how you deal with parents, and you may have not as college obsessed a parent group as some do, but they're an issue.
No, I do. And actually, I'm guilty myself. I think part of it also comes from, at least for people who may have been less privileged before, for a certain generation, it's like college wasn't accessible at all. And so getting to college was like you're successful. And I think for us, there's still a lot of people in that mindset that my child has to go to college, and in order for them to go to college, they have to get this SAT and they have to get these grades and all of that. And so it's sometimes that college drive, or just that prestige, if you will, that has been equated with a college education that drives parents to go in that direction. And I think as they see that people can be successful outside of college, not that college, I would like my medical doctor to definitely have gone to college. You know, I don't want you to get a high school diploma and go straight into surgery. There is instances where definitely years of training.
Leeches and a hacksaw.
Yes, years of training is required, but it may not be. And actually, from a personal perspective, you know, someone who's gotten a terminal degree, being through this experience as an educator has changed my thinking as a parent. So both of my kids are in college age, and both of them took a break after 3 years. My daughter went back, my son has not, and I'm okay with that. That's not his cup of tea, and he's successful in a construction job. He's supporting himself, living on his own, and that's great if that's what he loves to do. And then my daughter wants to go into being into therapy, and that's something that you do need training for from, you know, in a college degree, and so she's going that route. But I really just think it depends on what your child needs and how you define success as a parent.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways we should be copying Finland. You know, I've been to Finland, and parents are way more relaxed about their kids and far more open-minded about different paths kids pursue. And so in Finland, it's like, kid says, I want to go to college. Parents say, oh, that's fine. Or they say, I want to be a master electrician. And parents say, oh, that's cool. That's fine. And it's not the rich kids go to college and the poor kids go into the trades. It's just kind of find your lane and move forward with it. So we have a great question. This is probably, we're getting near the end of the hour, but this is a great question from Sarah to end on, which is, what can we do when we suggest an innovation and then the response is, it's a pandemic, and her word is I'm saturated, but I think for a lot of teachers, it's I'm fatigued, I'm exhausted, I'm overwhelmed. I mean, it's a very difficult time. And so I'd love your take on that.
I think educators are all innovating just by being in the classroom right now. I mean, we've had, you know, 30-year veterans learning how to run classes virtually. For them, that's a major innovation. Something that we did is an unconference that I think has been hugely helpful. If you have a faculty that's willing to share their ideas, instead of saying, this is our PD and this is what we're working on as a school, we've just given them, it's almost like, you know, their genius hour for teachers. But just what are you good at? What are you willing to share? And then teachers sign up for these different little workshops specific to what they want to learn from their colleagues. And I think that's been hugely successful. It's like dual layers because it provides a support system for teachers. It gives them that connection. It helps them feel like they're not alone in the process, and they're also learning something new. And it's in a safe environment. So I think that's like, if I was going to give one piece of advice for that, that would be a huge value action.
I'll use it. Sports, this is probably dangerous. You know, I'm going to wade into dangerous territory and use a sports metaphor. But for years, I was intent on being a good golfer. And honestly, I'm probably the worst golfer to ever spend that much time on a golf course. I mean, I'm just pitiful at it. But there was this phrase that was, you know, swing easy and learn to live with the extra distance. And I always would like grip the club really close. I'm going to hit the ball really hard. Then I hit a terrible shot. And one of the things I think is true is a lot of times the things that we can do to invite kids to take leadership in their learning actually reduce the load on the teacher. You know, like it's very difficult to lecture in front of a kid hour upon hour in person. And then you try to do that on Zoom and it's impossible. And so I think the opportunities are, yes, you're tired. Yes, it's exhausting. Yes, there are a lot of challenges. To me, it's the opportunity that's sort of beckoning us to say, what can we do to start paying a lot more attention to whether kids are learning and whether they're interested in what they're learning, and back off from making them learn something that honestly they may never have been interested in the first place, probably weren't going to retain, and even if they did, wouldn't use later in life. And so to me, that's my advice back, is there may be a path forward that's more fulfilling to you as a teacher, more aligned with why you entered the profession, that will lead to deeper, more retained and meaningful learning by students. And if you're not going to try it now, when will you try it? Because this is the perfect opportunity. So Katina, I just can't thank you enough for spending an hour here. You know,
can't believe it's over.
I know, but
too fast.
from the bottom of my heart is that you have been such an inspiration to me. And when I kind of get to spend time with you, and I know how hard you fight for your students, and I know that the type of vision you're providing in leadership, it just kind of, you know, despite the pandemic, despite a lot of things going on in the country that could drag you down, you are just this enormous bright spot. And so I am deeply grateful to you. I'm grateful for all the people across Hawaii, my buddy Josh Rapoon. I see a bunch of their names here. You guys are global leaders.
Yes.
You guys should be beating
They
your
are.
chest about the kind of progress you're making and what you're doing for your kids. And I just couldn't be more excited to have spent this time with you, and can't wait till I can get back and see you in person, which is not going to be the next few months, but it will be sometime in 2021.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for all that you've done, you know, just out of the goodness of your heart and seeing that it needs to be done and doing it, putting your money where your mouth is and your time and energy. That's awesome. We appreciate you.
Yeah, and we have another session Thursday with Shamika Gerald in Virginia on focusing on equity issues. And so if you're not exhausted by today, tune in there and we'll have another great discussion. But Katina, you're a rock star, and thank you so much. Keep it up and just keep going. This is really fabulous.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks everybody.